Good evening, everyone. My name is Eva Carpati, and it's my honor and pleasure to welcome you to our event this evening. I am a Vice President of National Council of Jewish Women of Canada and Chair of the National Anti-Semitism Committee. Before we started, just want to point out that you have been muted, and I ask that you stay muted throughout the evening. After Belle's presentation, there'll be time for a Q&A, which we'll be doing in the form of writing your questions in the chat. And that also, I ask that you please wait till her presentation is over to ensure your question has not been answered, and then we will proceed to answer those. We're going to try to keep this event to an hour and 15 minutes. We are gathered here today from across the country, from south of the border and from across the pond. So thank you and welcome, everyone. I'm presently in Toronto. Therefore, I'd like to acknowledge that the land I'm meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. National Council of Jewish Women of Canada has been on these sacred lands for 128 years. And in the spirit of Judaism, is dedicated to furthering human welfare in the Jewish and general communities through education, service, and social action. Our current president is the incredibly dedicated and passionate Linda Steinberg. Our organization has sections in Vancouver, in Edmonton, Winnipeg, in Simcoe County, Toronto, and Montreal. We are also represented on the global scene. We sit on the International Council of Jewish Women, comprised of women from 34 countries, which also has a seat at the UN. And this May, our own Debbie Wasserman will become the president of the International Council of Jewish Women. We are so thrilled and excited for her. Anti-Semitism awareness has long been a project of NCJWC, but October 7th catapulted it to top priority. The Anti-Semitism Committee has been working to address the call to action. And I'd like to just give a shout out to the remarkable women who make up this committee from across Canada: Lorraine Burke, Patty Carlson, Shamila Shikyar, Susan Glickman, Naomi Kingston, Dorothy Reitman, Dalia Ruzinek, Stella Segal, Monica Simon, Linda Steinberg, Teresa Wesolewski, and Debbie Wasserman. Thank you to this amazing team. So we've struggled with how best to make an impact. As were many Jewish organizations, we were driven by a strong need to right the wrongs perpetrated against us and to find the allies who would support us. I am proud to say our hard work paid off. We created a project for which we received a major federal grant from Heritage Canada. This is a multi-year project that we have entitled Fighting Anti-Semitism: The Power of Small Conversations. The project's objective is to create opportunities for all Canadians with diverse opinions, perspectives, and backgrounds to converse respectfully and to acquire knowledge. To drive us through this new terrain, we have been so fortunate to find the perfect person to be our program manager. Deb Shine, as she brings wealth of knowledge, experience, and humanity. She's just been an incredible find and driving force. So at this point, I want to invite Deb onto the stage with me to just briefly inform and update you on our profound project. Deb, thank you.
Thanks so much, Eva, and thanks to the National Anti-Semitism Committee for inviting me to say a few words about the power of small conversations. This is a joint project between our national and Toronto offices with active participation from all of the sections across the country. And as Eva said, the project evolved out of a desire to address the exponential rise of anti-Semitism in Canada over the last number of years, especially since October 7th. And it's intended to support people in having conversations about hate and the impact it has on our society. We did receive a multi-year grant from the Government of Canada, and we were one of the only small grassroots organizations to be selected, so that's really something to be very proud of. As Eva said, the power of small conversations brings people together, diverse opinions from diverse backgrounds, in small groups of 8 to 10 people to engage in a meaningful conversation, build confidence in navigating difficult topics, especially during these polarized times, and foster community ground in shared Canadian values. Using a co-facilitation model, pairing a moderator with a storyteller, our goal is to build understanding, reduce hate and anti-Semitism, and strengthen connections between people. Supporting the work, we've partnered with organizations across Canada to develop information and resource materials on topics such as, not all of them, I'll just name a few, the Charter of Human Rights and the limits of free speech, the Holocaust, and about Jews in Canada. These materials will be shared with participants after the conversations to support ongoing learning and discussion. Over the next couple of years, we hope to reach 3,000 people through these conversations. This grassroots effort to combat hate and anti-Semitism reflects the work and mission of the National Council of Jewish Women of Canada. It's about information sharing, storytelling, and community building. We're getting ready to start our pilot in the spring of 2026, and we already have, spring will come, I promise, and we already have over 40 people signed up to participate in our trainings, host and lead conversations, and provide feedback on our model and materials in preparation for our official launch in the fall of 2026. One of the people who has helped us in our thinking and engaged with me, and who also provided one of the resource packages, is Belle Jarniewski from the Jewish Heritage Center of Western Canada, who we're all here to hear from tonight. We're delighted to have her join us to talk about anti-Semitism, what's in a word. Belle's contributions to Canada, to combating anti-Semitism, and to documenting lived experiences of the Holocaust are extraordinary. She has, since 2013, served as Canada's federally appointed delegate to the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. And in May 2025, she was recognized in the Manitoba legislature for her work to bring education on the Holocaust and anti-Semitism to students across Manitoba. For all of this, Belle, we thank you and we welcome you. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. It was lovely meeting many of you in Winnipeg. And I'm just going to share my screen. There we go. And there we go. Anti-Semitism, as you've noted, and as we all know, is a huge problem for us in Canada right now. You mentioned my role with the IHRA. I'm one of several Canadian delegates. And when we were in Israel for the plenary session in December, I found it ironic that our Israeli colleagues were worried about the Canadians. They had just gone through these horrific 2 years, and they were worried about us and about the Australians. And everybody is aware of what is happening here. It's something that growing up, I never experienced. It's something that I never would have imagined would be our reality in Canada today. But when we talk about anti-Semitism, it's important that we know what it is. And so that is really going to be the focus of my talk today. And I'm going to be referring to the IHRA definition as well. But anti-Semitism itself, it's been around for more than 2,000 years. It predated Christianity. It existed in antiquity with the ancient Greeks, who had many of the same conspiracy theories about us that we hear today. But it's like, I like to call it a virus, because like a virus, it mutates. It adapts to the times, but it just feeds on hate. And often people say, well, isn't anti-Semitism just racism? But it's very different from other forms of racism because it combines those traditional racist ideas of a perceived inferiority with conspiracy theories that accuse us of having too much power and also being the cause of malevolence, basically everything that goes wrong. So in other words, unlike other forms of racism, anti-Semitism pushes both up and also down. And it can also intersect with other forms of racism and discrimination, such as xenophobia, misogyny, and especially for Jews who are people of color, who are immigrants, or who are members of the 2S LGBTQIA plus communities who experience both forms of racism and are often left out of discussions in their own groups because they are Jewish. So a little bit about the IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. It is the only intergovernmental organization, it's more than 20 years old, that has a mandate focused on addressing contemporary challenges related to the Holocaust and also the genocide of the Roma. My role is I sit on the Education Working Group and also the Committee on Anti-Semitism and Holocaust Denial. And I've been very, very fortunate to meet people from the now 35 different member countries and the international partners, scholars from all around the world, to network with them and to really learn from them. So the IHRA began with the Stockholm Declaration, and it welcomes new member countries on the basis of their commitment to that declaration and the newer 2020 ministerial declaration. So currently, there are 35 full member countries, one liaison country. So there is a path to becoming a full member. You're first an observer country, and we have 8 of those currently. And then you do a very intense study of what is happening in your own country, what you're doing to educate on the Holocaust and anti-Semitism, university programs, etc. And then you move up to liaison country. You're supported by 1 or 2 other countries as you move up. And then eventually you're accepted as a full member. And each country's government, their federal government, selects that national delegation of experts and policy makers, and it's chaired by a senior official. As you know, we no longer have an envoy. And Deborah Lyons was both our envoy on anti-Semitism and Holocaust remembrance, and she also served as the head of our delegation. So at the moment, of course, we know we are no longer going to have an envoy. We also no longer at the moment have a head of delegation. And when we were in Jerusalem, we were there with someone from the federal government who really didn't know much about IHRA or much about the work we do. And this is very serious. There are also what we call PIPs, Permanent International Partners. And at the moment, there are 10 of these, and they're international and intergovernmental organizations. They participate in our working groups and the committees, and they also join the plenary meetings as observers. And among them, some of these, and you may be surprised to see these names: UNESCO, the UN Outreach Project on the Holocaust, the European Union, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, the Arlson Archives, which of course is the major Holocaust archive in Germany, the Council of Europe, the Claims Conference, And this is a newer one, the Global Action Against Mass Atrocity Crimes, GAMAC, and the European Agency for Fundamental Rights. Now, I should also say that among those 35 countries, there are many countries that aren't exactly close to Israel, aren't exactly considered allies of Israel. And you could say that about some of the international partners as well. So this is just, and I'll speak about this more a little bit later, but this, there's this accusation sometimes that IHRA it's an Israeli organization or that it's led by Israel, and nothing could be further from the truth. So in 2016, when Romania had the presidency, every year a different country holds the presidency of the IHRA. It was Israel last year. As of just the other day, it is Argentina. And everything is adopted by consensus, including this definition. So that means that everyone that was there in Romania, all of the different countries, had to agree to the definition. And today, 46 countries around the world, again, many of whom who are not at all allies of Israel, and well over 1,000 entities worldwide, including hundreds of universities, in Canada, several provinces, and many municipalities, especially in Ontario, have adopted or endorsed the legally non-binding definition. Canada adopted it in 2019, Manitoba in 2022, and Ontario in 2020. Canada is the first country that issued a handbook. It was published by the Government of Canada, by the Envoy's Office, and what we try to do is to contextualize the definition for Canada. That is very important, to show examples that we see in Canada of anti-Semitism and how they connect to the definition. There was broad consultation right across the country, and yet it's important to know that the definition and the handbook do not in any way supersede, modify, or direct an interpretation of any existing federal, provincial, or municipal statute, laws, regulations. And what it does is it is a tool to help understand what anti-Semitism is and also what it is not. And it helps to reinforce and interpret laws that we already have. Unfortunately, it has been constantly and willfully mischaracterized. And when I say willfully, it's because there are many people that we have spoken to that know very well that what they're saying about the definition is absolutely not true, and yet they continue to do it. And just a few weeks ago, Leah Gazan of the NDP actually said that one of the biggest problems we have in Canada today is the IHRA definition. Now, there are 4 parts to the definition. The core definition, which you see here, what is called the preamble, and the illustrative examples, and finally the postscript. But again, very important to understand that those 4 parts all go together, that there has been some suggestion by people that this core definition is the definition and that we can exclude the illustrative examples. I've seen tremendous arguments about this, but it is very clear, and we made it clear from the beginning, that these illustrative examples form part of the definition. So the core definition, as you see, that anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews, and that rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. And I also want to make something else clear. So this definition is very much based on an earlier definition. It's been changed a bit from the European Fundamental Rights Agency. You may have heard, because he is talking about it all the time, a person named Ken Stern, who claims that he was the author of the IHRA definition and that he now rejects it. There is ample proof out there that Kenneth Stern, first of all, was never a member of the IHRA, never had anything to do with the IHRA. And in that earlier form of the definition with the Fundamental Rights Agency, he had a very, very small role in communications, and he had no part at all in authoring the definition. So the preamble is very important, and it says that to guide the IHRA in its work, the following examples may serve as illustrations. And context is always important, and that's why that word may comes in, that manifestations might include the targeting of the State of Israel conceived as a Jewish collectivity. However, criticism of Israel similar to that leveled against any other country cannot be regarded as anti-Semitic. And this is one of the ways that the definition is mischaracterized. It's also one of the reasons that this is such a very important and strong definition, because we see it in Israel itself. We see people that are against some of the policies, that don't like the prime minister, and that's not anti-Semitic. But it can cross the line into anti-Semitism, and we'll see that later. So anti-Semitism frequently charges Jews with conspiring to harm humanity, and it is often used to blame Jews for why things go wrong, as I said earlier. It's expressed in speech, writing, visual forms, and action, and it employs sinister stereotypes and negative character traits, often based on these very old and historical tropes that mutate. And then we come to the illustrative examples. So there are 11 of these, and they illustrate common contemporary forms of anti-Semitism. Some of them have ancient roots, and others are newer in origin. And as the preamble specifies, they're not exhaustive. These are just examples, and they certainly do not cover all forms of anti-Semitism. But what I want to make clear that is so important, those references, and we can understand this in Canada, I think, better than most, they're not there to protect Israel. They represent our lived experiences and our reality as Jews and even non-Jews all over the world. So I'm going to go through the examples, and I'm going to give you some of the examples that we used in the Canadian guide. So the first example is calling for, aiding, or justifying the killing or harming of Jews in the name of a radical ideology or an extremist view of religion. Now, these are ones that we used in the guide, but there are so many that we're seeing every day in Canada happening. So 6 years ago, in 2020, a religious leader in an online sermon, a Muslim religious leader referred to Jews as brothers of monkeys and pigs and asked God to tear them apart. Pretty clear. In Toronto, in 2023, there was vandalism that was reading, "Get rid of the kikes," "Hitler was right," and hashtag "Kill the Jews." This was where we were referring to a bathroom in an elementary and middle school. I'm sure you know that there are countless examples of this in schools, in universities, at Concordia, for instance, all over Canada. We are seeing this. The Fatima Center, which began in 1977, is a religious group. It has published statements describing the granting of full citizenship to the Jews as among Satan's plans against the church, and referring to the duty incumbent upon Catholics to oppose Jewish naturalism. Now, I want to be clear, of course, that this is not, the regular stream of Catholics with whom we have really good relationship and dialogue. And of course, the Catholic Church since 1965 has changed their teaching about Jews. But this is a radical group, and there are radical groups among them. This is another example. So this is a fellow named Luke Alexander McDonald. He has a slightly different online name. He's from Nova Scotia, and he was actually arrested following posts targeting Jewish communities. And he was charged with advocating and promoting genocide, public incitement of hatred, and willful promotion of hatred. And so here you can see what he's saying. He's basically calling for our death. I want to see all Zios killed. He's referring to Zionists, of course, which has become is being used as a dirty word. I think it's very important for us to always explain exactly what Zionism is, because there has been such an effort to malevolently change the meaning of Zionism. And of course, just explain that all it is the right for Jews to self-determination in their ancestral homeland. And he's calling for, as you can see, this really ugly stuff to delete Israel from the map, to hang Jews by the neck, fry them like bacon on the chair, burn all Israelis at the stake, death penalty for all Zionists. And this is just an example also of what we're seeing online, which is a huge problem. I could tell you that if you've had that experience of seeing a post that's anti-Semitic and trying to report it to Meta, you will have tremendous difficulty becoming successful. Meta will almost never remove it when you first report it. You then have to appeal their decision. They'll say it doesn't go beyond their community standards. And most of the time, they still won't take it down. But what's also important to know is that often it's the comments after a post that are the worst, and Meta won't even look at the comments anymore. So, this is, and he's using, of course, this, he's referring to us as colonial scum, and very, very dangerous. But just one example. This is another fellow. I hereby declare Canada to be Zio-Jewish free zone. Sometimes people will change the spelling of words like Jewish in order to evade any kind of reporting or meta recognizing that it is anti-Semitic. Victory for Hamas, and there again, he's purposely spelling Jews incorrectly. It's really ugly things there. And he's going back to the historical, references to the Talmud, which of course, at a certain time in the Middle Ages were burned. No need to go to read it all to you, but it's really horrific. The second example is making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical allegations about Jews, such as the power of Jews as a collective, and especially, but not exclusively, the myth about a world Jewish conspiracy or of Jews controlling the media, the economy, the government, and all societal institutions. And I must say, we must be doing a terrible job of that when we see what's out there. So this was the example that we chose. Telegram is another platform. It's an even more dangerous platform than something like Facebook, because there are very few rules there. You can express all kinds of violent intent, etc., and they will leave it up. And what happens too is that they inspire other people in places like this. And we know, for instance, that during COVID, when a lot of young people were at home and out of school, they were descending into these very dark places in the internet, and were being influenced by it. So this user posted an image depicting Jews as a rodent, alongside a quote calling for the destruction of Jews as a means of defending society. And it also invokes a dual loyalty trope, because the rat is wrapped in both an Israeli and an American flag, suggesting that we have this dual loyalty. And of course, this idea of Jews as vermin is borrowed from the Nazis. There was the infamous film called Der ewige Jude, the Eternal Jew, where Jews are depicted as vermin. And what he wrote, and he's holding the Talmud again, when rats appear, they bring ruin by destroying mankind's goods and foodstuffs. In this way, they spread disease, plague, leprosy, typhoid fever, cholera, dysentery, and so on. They are cunning, cowardly, and cruel, and found mostly in large packs. Among the animals, they represent the rudiment of insidious underground destruction, just like the Jews among human beings. So, very, very dangerous. And another reference to going back to the Holocaust is that the Jews, the Nazis not only described us as vermin, but accused us of spreading disease, in particular typhus, and that this was their excuse often for going in and destroying a community. Example 3, accusing Jews as a people of being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoing committed by a single Jewish person or group, or even for acts committed by non-Jews. So during COVID, we were immediately accused, along with Asians, of inventing COVID, and in order to make money from it. And of course, the fact that the owner of Pfizer is a Greek Jew helped them with that conspiracy. So this is just an example of a document that was going around. It was on the internet, but it was also dropped in mailboxes in various places around the country. And this is, there's a list of all these Jewish people, and this is how they are proving that Jews are responsible for COVID. You will also see on the right the Masonic symbol. And we are also often put together with the Masons. This is a historical thing, the Judeo-Masonic plot to control the world. Denying the fact, scope, mechanisms, such as the gas chambers or the intentionality of the genocide of the Jewish people at the hands of the National Socialist Germany and its supporters and accomplices during World War II, in other words, the Holocaust. And of course, in Canada, Ernst Zundel is one of our prime examples in this book, but we're seeing it even more now. If depending on the algorithms that you have, there is so much out there of people just denying the Holocaust. And last week we had these wonderful 2 days of professional development in Manitoba with 270 teachers. And one of the superintendents told me that it's now a mandated curriculum, as it is in Ontario. For us, it's grades 6, 9, and 11, and we partnered with the government in its development. And so the superintendent told me that a parent had written to her and said, I do not want my child to study the Holocaust because it did not happen. So that's the kind of stuff that's out there. Accusing the Jews, example 5, as a people, or Israel as a state, of inventing or exaggerating the Holocaust. And here you have an example online. Honest people ask themselves, why is the Jewish occupation lying about many of the barbaric actions that took place on Saturday? That he's referring to October 7th, 2023. They're using these made-up acts of cruelty and barbarism to tell the world a mini Holocaust just happened to them again. Is it possible that if they are lying about these events and creating a false genocide, it is likely that they may have lied about certain details of a previous big genocide that may have occurred? Another version of this, of course, is what we're seeing a lot of, and saying that what has happened in Gaza is the real, quote, the real Holocaust. Example 6 is accusing Jewish citizens of being more loyal to Israel or to the alleged priorities of Jews worldwide than the interests of their own country, etc. And so this accusation of dual loyalty, or even being more loyalty, we see this a lot. But Dimitri Lascaris actually ran for federal political party leadership, and he accused Michael Levitt and Anthony Housefather. Michael was then an MP, of being more devoted to, quote, apartheid Israel than to their own prime minister and their own colleagues in the Liberal caucus. We're seeing the fortunately diminished federal NDP party. It seems to be obsessed with Israel, And as I'm sure you saw, it seemed that rather than debating about the economy or homelessness or food prices, they had a debate about Palestine. Denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination by claiming that the existence of Israel is a racist endeavor. Ramzi Zeid is the head of the Palestinian Association here in Manitoba. And he was at a rally a block away from me. That's at the superstore. And he has since erased this post, but fortunately, enough of us did a screenshot so that we can prove it. He has said some pretty awful things, but this one is among them, that millions of people around the world are starting to see Zionism for what it really is, a disease that must be destroyed. And he said, denounce it, refuse to call it Israel or any iteration that denies Palestinian existence. Call it for what it is, a sexual colonial abomination that has no right to exist. Well, another concerning thing about Mr. Zeid is that he is a member of the advisory committee for the Canadian Museum for Human Rights' planned exhibit that depicts a very one-sided view. It's called Palestine Uprooted, Nakba Then and Now. And he's among others that think like he does. Other examples are erasing Israel from the map. So you have the map of Israel on the left with the Israeli flag torn away and the Palestinian flag in its place, or things like this. This land is is Palestine, not Israel. We have seen this even in schools. We have a local restaurant here, where I went in years ago and would not feel comfortable going into again, where there's a map of Israel on the wall of the restaurant, except it says Palestine on the whole map. The eighth example is applying double standards by requiring of Israel a behavior not expected or demanded by any other democratic nation. So they accuse Israel of all kinds of human rights violations, while never criticizing other regimes with far worse human rights abuses, such as Iran, China, North Korea, Iraq, and Pakistan. And of course, nobody is calling for the erasure, the destruction of those countries, only Israel. And so 2 years ago, a post was made on Instagram in the context of the ongoing conflict that claimed that Zionist genocide is the greatest act of aggression. It is the root cause of the violence. And so laying the sole responsibility on Israel and blaming Zionism for the root cause of violence negates the unprovoked atrocities that happened on October 7th, committed by Hamas, and the fact that Israel, as a democratic state, like all others, has the right to defend itself during a time of war. Example 9, again, hard to choose. Using the symbols and images associated with classic anti-Semitism, such as claims of Jews killing Jesus or blood libel. So this cartoon on the left appeared in La Presse in 2024, and it depicts Netanyahu as a vampire. And that is basically, based on the old-fashioned blood libel. The one on the right is very interesting. It is a cartoon that depicts an Israeli soldier stabbing with a bayonet a figure that looks like Jesus, and he's wrapped in a keffiyeh. And it says, do not kill him twice. So this one does a lot of things. First of all, it takes the Jew out of Jesus. And we see this over and over again, this claim that Jesus was a Palestinian, which makes no sense at all. I did a lecture for a group of medical students a year ago, and one of them saw this and said, I don't know what you're talking about. Jesus was a Palestinian. And there was nothing that I could do to convince him otherwise. The other thing that it does is it accuses us once again of deicide, of being responsible for Jesus's death. And this is, again, something that the Catholic Church no longer teaches, but it, of course, resulted in hundreds and hundreds of years of religious anti-Semitism against us, and this brings it back again. We also had a local rock group here in Winnipeg that in December launched a song that was called Make Jesus Palestinian Again. And more recently, another song, and in among the lyrics says that Jews poison Palestinian wells. Again, an old-fashioned trope that they are mutating. Drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis. Here too, we see this all the time. We see people calling Israelis Nazis. The Nazis attempted to annihilate every Jew everywhere. That was their goal. Very different from current, from Israeli policy. So in 2024, a protester on an overpass in Toronto held a poster that compared former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett to Hitler and Zionism to Nazism. And then here in Manitoba, a nursing student who is temporarily suspended for this posted this cartoon where the Israeli soldier is looking in the mirror and sees himself as a Nazi, and the caption being the irony of becoming what you once hated. And very unfortunately, there are a lot of anti-Zionist Jews who are only too happy to defend these kinds of things and, of course, are against the IHRA definition. Holding Jews collectively responsible for the actions of the State of Israel. So many examples of this, but since October 7th, 2023, there have in Canada been so many attacks on Jewish schools, synagogues, Jewish community centers, and of course, 3 synagogues just so recently targeted in 1 week in Toronto. Ours wasn't targeted, synagogue in Winnipeg wasn't targeted by gunfire, but there was some really ugly graffiti put on the glass of the front door. And, you know, that police car says it all. We are all over Canada spending tremendous amounts of money on security. I know that we're launching a campaign here in Winnipeg to help cover security costs. And we unfortunately no longer feel safe in this country. And then we have the postscript. So this is also very important because it says anti-Semitic acts are only, this is where the non-legally binding comes in. They're criminal only when they're so defined by law. So, for example, in some countries, if you deny the Holocaust or distribute anti-Semitic materials or show certain symbols, that is the law. That is against the law, and you can be arrested, but only when they're so defined by law. And criminal acts are anti-Semitic when the targets of attacks, whether they are people or property, such as buildings, schools, places of worship, and cemeteries, are selected because they are or are perceived to be Jewish or linked to Jews. And anti-Semitic discrimination is also the denial of Jews of opportunities or services available to others, and in many countries that is illegal. We, of course, have a long history of this in Canada, going back to well before the Holocaust in the 1920s in Quebec, and to a lesser extent in Alberta. There were boycotts against Jewish businesses. There were signs put on Jewish stores asking people not to buy from them and only to buy from Christians. There were rallies by the Ku Klux Klan in the 1920s. There were fascists such as Adrien Arcand, William Whitaker in Manitoba, who wore swastikas on their tie pins or on their sleeves and had quite a large following. And of course, Jews were denied. There were quota systems in several universities, including the Faculty of Medicine here at the University of Manitoba, that for many years limited the number of Jews that could get into these programs, even though they had very high marks and other students who had even failed pre-med courses were getting in ahead of them. And one example that I like to talk about is Monty Hall, from which you probably all remember from Let's Make a Deal. Monty Hall was from Winnipeg. He was the president of the University of Manitoba Students Association. He had incredibly high marks, and he tried to get into medicine twice and was not accepted. And for that reason, went into show business. This is just one example of violence, which you've all seen, this Jewish man that was beaten in Montreal in front of his 3 children. But what really chilled me was, I posted this, and the comment that someone made to me was that the kippah, the yarmulke, is a sign of terrorism in the world. Just this week in Toronto, the Al-Quds rally, such horrific symbols of anti-Semitism. On the top right, again, Jews depicted as vermin, as in the definition, and going back to the Nazis. The fact that people feel comfortable showing these kinds of things in public is very upsetting. It's worrisome, and I think that one of the things that also bothered me, I know that Doug Ford tried to file an injunction against the rally taking place, but what we're seeing here and elsewhere in Canada is that people are saying things that are against the law. People are making threats. People are doing all kinds of things, and the police, instead of enforcing laws that exist, are just trying to avoid escalation and keeping the two sides apart. And in my opinion, this only encourages people to go further. And of course, now with Iran, we believe that there are Iranians who are acting on behalf of the Islamic Republic regime in Canada, targeting not only Jews, but also Iranians who oppose the regime. So that is my presentation, and I'm happy to welcome any questions that you may have.
Well, thank you, Belle. I don't know what to say. You've really presented an incredible information to us and explained it so well. But I'm sure there are lots of questions, so I asked people to write in the chat their questions. I did receive one already, and it was about the IHRA definition.
Mm-hmm.
The organizations that have not signed on to it yet, how can we encourage them to do so? Like, what can we do?
Well, I think we first of all have to hope that our country and our provinces that have already adopted will implement it in some way. And I will give you an example of what is happening. So, as I said, we partnered with the province in developing this curriculum. We had a student who, a teacher that we recommended to the government. He was seconded, and I gave him some direction. And we have this amazing document called the IHRA Recommendations on Teaching and Learning About the Holocaust, which, again, accepted by consensus by 35 different countries. And earlier on, when I met with the Minister of Education and her team, it was just before we were publishing the second edition, on which I was involved in working on, and came out in December. And I was worried that the URL would be the right one, because I wasn't sure if it would be the same as, and I was assured no problem. And so it was listed among the resources in the curriculum guide. When the curriculum guide was published in its final form, all of a sudden that resource is missing, as well as the IHRA recommendations for teaching and learning about the Roma genocide. So I had a meeting with the minister and her team, as well as people from the Department of Education. And I believe that actually that is where the problems are coming from. And you probably have the same things going on in Toronto. And I was told, first of all, oh, there must have been a misunderstanding. We never said that. But then the truth came out and said we were given instructions not to include anything with IHRA in it. So not only the definition, but this document. So and also the other issue very much is the anti-Zionist groups, including and very much so the anti-Zionist Jewish groups such as Independent Jewish Voices. So when we went to a committee of City Hall here in Winnipeg, hoping to adopt, to have them adopt the city adopt the definition, we had about 8 or 9 of us who spoke. We also had Erwin Kotler. It was 3:00 in the morning. He was in Israel and he zoomed in. We had Richard Marceau from CIJA. And then we had a procession of 18 people, about 17 of whom were from Independent Jewish Voices, who lied, who mischaracterized it, and who told the people sitting there on the committee, pointed to us and said, don't believe them, they're gaslighting you. And wherever we go, I know that Independent Jewish Voices met with the Minister of Education. So I do think we need to educate people on what the definition is about, but we need support from the provinces, the provincial governments who did endorse it and seem to be forgetting about it, to help us implement it so that we can say that some of these things that I've described, or what is happening in especially the Toronto District School Board, is pure anti-Semitism according to that definition.
Okay.
And hi, Eva.
All right. Here's a question. I'm wondering if you have any ideas as to what we can do to combat what's going on. As you know, this Eva says, I am a Holocaust educator and a firm believer in the conviction that education is the best tool we have in the box. However, we are not succeeding. Are we losing ground?
We are. I think one of the good things, I believe that the Ontario curriculum also includes, I think all of us, as we were looking to mandated curriculums, decided on a couple of things. We know that teaching about the Holocaust alone has not prevented anti-Semitism, is not preventing anti-Semitism. So we needed to include in that curriculum who Jews are, what Judaism is, our contributions to this country, but also historical and contemporary anti-Semitism. The problem is that it's the same thing with any subject. No one goes into every school and ensures that the teacher is teaching exactly what the curriculum says. I mean, I had a child whose teacher didn't like teaching about math in grade 4. She actually taught them a lot of Holocaust literature. And then they got to grade 5 and they had to catch up. It's really hard to enforce. But we need to make sure that we are teaching about anti-Semitism. We did that with our professional development here. We did it last year as well. We need to give teachers the resources, proper resources about anti-Semitism. And we have to keep speaking out. And for me, you know, when I do a presentation on anti-Semitism, if 3/4 of the people in the room don't change their minds, that's okay, as long as 1/4 of the people in the room learn something and say, oh, you know, maybe I didn't quite understand this, or I didn't quite understand the degree of what is going on. But the other thing that I want to say is that we do have a lot of allies that are currently more silent than they should be, but I can understand why, because the minute they come to our support, many people accuse them of being Islamophobic. And that is very sad. And that is also the legacy of the previous prime minister, who anytime an anti-Semitic event happened, he had to also talk about Islamophobia. And Carney does it as well. And we would never do that. If we were talking about something that happened to Indigenous people, we would not start talking about another form of racism. But when it comes to anti-Semitism, they always have to mention Islamophobia. We have to also teach dialogue as opposed to debate. this is something that is lacking in our schools and even lacking among adults. We have to win. We have to win the argument. And we don't win when we do that. We have to learn from each other. We have to learn to listen. And I encourage teachers to learn to teach their students how to dialogue respectfully, that they don't necessarily have to agree with one another, but they have to, first of all, create a safe space in that classroom where they can have these discussions. Because the genie is out of the bottle. And when you go into schools, this is happening. And teachers are often at a loss of how to deal with it. And it's not just this subject. I'm also hearing that there are a lot of Russian students who are afraid to say that they're Russian and say that they're Ukrainian instead.
Now, I have a question. If the schools are mandating to teach Holocaust education, not all of the teachers believe our truth, which is the
Mm-hmm.
truth. So how can they regulate those teachers who don't have it in their hearts to tell the truth?
It's very hard. I mean, the more professional development that we do, the better. Most of the teachers that we had out were not Jewish, but of course they were also friendly to the idea of teaching about the subject and wanted to feel more confident. But unfortunately, I don't think that the government is going to, enforce. However, if parents are seeing that in their classroom, they need to complain to the administration properly. This happened here in a school where it wasn't being, a parent said, well, we have this new mandated curriculum. When are you going to start teaching about it? And the principal said, well, I'm not sure, maybe second semester, maybe next year. And so we immediately jumped in and said, hey, we're having this professional development day and you haven't signed up. Well, the next thing we know is he signed up all of his humanities teachers, which was great. And because in addition to some people just not wanting and some people having some very negative ideas about Jews, there are also those who are afraid to teach. They don't feel comfortable because it is a difficult subject to teach. So we need to support them as much as we can.
Okay, Rochelle has a comment. She says Holocaust education has portrayed Jews as victims, but society today sees Jews as privileged white colonializers, oppressors, and Jewish and Israel's success has put us in this light. Do you think that's a problem?
It is a problem, but again, it's something we can address with education. So we did this wonderful presentation that teachers were eager to share about who Jews are, and that also included. It showed because I mean I've seen this in presentations where a teacher will blurt out, "What? Jews aren't all white?" So we show them pictures of Jews from all around the world, from the Middle East, from North Africa, from Asia. And we also talk about the reality of our community and that there are many Jews that require support from our social systems here, child and family services, etc. And we share that rich culture with them as well. And as far as the colonizers, we explain, not always easy to do, and that what Zionism is, our ancestral attachment to the homeland, our history, explaining that where this word Palestine came from at the time of the disastrous wars in Judea against the Romans, and the Romans removed that name and changed it to Syria Palestina, but that it has absolutely zero to do with Palestine today. And we can also carefully explain that this idea of Palestinian identity really came about in the 1960s with Yasser Arafat and Russian influence. And that, of course, at the time of the British Mandate, that we were called Palestinians in those who were there.
It seems crazy in Canada,
Mm-hmm.
where when you look at a map, I looked at a map of Israel from the Canadian government to show where there's problems and you shouldn't travel.
Yeah,
So travel advisory, and Palestine is on the map that Canada puts out. So it's like, what is our country? What does our country believe? What are they putting forth for people to understand of being a Jew and of Israel, um, when this is the reality of the Canadian government?
I don't know why the Prime Minister thought it was necessary to recognize Palestine at this time, because it doesn't fulfill the description of a country at
No.
this point. There is no in anything. The only thing that it could do is cause harm to us. And I think it's very unfortunate that he chose to do so. I was very disappointed. And because he did that, all of a sudden there are other things that happen, such as the map that you suggest, that you told us about. And here in Winnipeg, there was last time in Yom Ha'atzmaut, the provincial government raised the Israeli flag. And every year they would get a complaint that why aren't they raising the Palestinian flag? And no matter who was in power, the previous government or this one, the explanation was, well, Canada doesn't recognize Palestine as a country. Well, as soon as he recognized Palestine, all of a sudden you have the Palestinian flag flying outside on one of the days that the Palestinians recognize. And, as opposed to peaceful celebration, it was an ugly demonstration yet again.
It becomes very divisive.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
If
Okay.
I
Do
can
we?
just ask and I know it won't be brief, but as brief as possible, just because you're involved with the Human Rights
Mm,
Museum, can you just comment on the status there, what's happening with that proposed exhibit?
sure, absolutely. So we used to partner with the museum for events on January 27th. We have a couple of people there that we still consider as our friends. The person, for instance, who curated the Holocaust Gallery in the museum and who had nothing to do with this. So I just want to preface it by that. Um, the announcement was made a few months ago that they were having an exhibit called Palestine Uprooted, Napka Then and Now, which suggests that it's ongoing. Um, very little information about what is going to be in the exhibit. Several people have met with the CEO. I met with her along with the local CJA representative, vice president, and we were very clear that she's putting a target on our backs with this exhibit because it tells one side of the story. It, no matter how you cut it, it doesn't say anything about the more than 850,000 Jews that were expelled or ethnically cleansed from Arab countries and settled in Israel. It doesn't talk about the pogroms against Jews before the independence of the state of Israel. The fact that many of the Arabs left of their own accord, or were told, not all of them, but many, and that were told to leave to allow the 5 Arab armies that came in to come in and clean everything up, get rid of the Jews. It won't show any of that. We immediately separated our relationship from the museum. So on October 27th, they didn't have a program in the end. We had a very good speaker planned, but she decided, for whatever reason, also not to take part in it, and we had a different program of our own. There have been a lot of people that have done a lot of research on this issue. She's been very secretive. For instance, we asked her who the advisory committee was, and I was astounded that she would not tell us who when Gustavo and I met with her. This is something that, as far, we do, the Jewish Heritage Center does a lot of exhibits of our own, and the advisory committee is always public knowledge. Of course, we were able to find that information that was available a few years ago of who those people are. There was, you may have seen Terry Newman's excellent article in the National Post that described the background of some of these people that made up the advisory committee. And it's very worrisome. Since then, I know that a lot of people who were supporters from the Jewish community have pulled their support from the museum, not only locally, but from across the country. We're worried that the board members who come from across the country are not being made aware of all of our concerns. We hope that they will be eventually, especially with all these articles that have been coming out. And we also saw kind of a precursor of this exhibit. There was another exhibit that was at the Canadian Mennonite University's Canadian Mennonite Heritage Gallery that was absolutely horrific. It had red triangles. It said Israel is apartheid, genocide, the Holocaust. It had the name of a Jewish member of parliament from here scrawled on it. It was absolutely disgusting. And they were taking school children through there because the way it was described in the media was just about culture, which is, basically a lot of what they're saying about the exhibit at the CMHR as well. Although they are saying, well, people are just telling their stories. So we're very worried about it. More recently, several of us received a letter from the CEO saying that she is reviewing the idea of having an exhibit about the experiences of Jews from Middle Eastern North African countries. So I wrote back to her with questions only. Are you planning on delaying the current exhibit and including the experiences of Jews from Middle Eastern North African countries in this exhibit? Or are you, if not, when are you planning to have this exhibit? Because we know that when they plan an exhibit at a national museum, it takes years before it comes about. And by then, the damage will already be done. Needless to say, I have as yet, and it's been a couple of weeks, I guess, I haven't received an answer from her.
Okay. There's one final question. How do we help Jews to feel comfortable going to synagogue and community buildings and to combat statements at their workplace?
Well, I'm not sure what's happening in Toronto. I could tell you that at our synagogue, I'm seeing more people than ever. I think we want to, we feel safe. We don't have armed police. We have a guard. It's the largest synagogue in Western Canada, but we're seeing young people, older people, everyone showing up just to sort of feel connected, to show our resilience that nobody is going to stop us from doing these things. We've certainly increased security. We are part of that security system, the Jewish security system from all across the country. And, we have enacted security measures that we never have in the past, that it's unfortunate that we have to do that. But people come out to programs. Now, statements in your workplace is a little more difficult. I think that some people feel very uncomfortable about that. So it really depends on your comfort level. I have been in situations where people have said really stupid things to me, and I will just very carefully explain to them why that makes absolutely no sense. And, a lot of the times they don't change their minds. But in the workplace, it's not easy.
Okay. I'm going to call upon Monica Simon, one of the members of our team, to have closing remarks and to thank you. You have been incredible, Belle.
Thank you so much. That is so kind.
We have really learned a lot. Monica?
Thank you, Belle. This is the third time I heard your presentation on anti-Semitism over the last 6 months, and every time I'm in awe of the work you have done on all our behalf. Your knowledge on the subject is vast, and we appreciate you sharing it with us. Your presentation today is extremely valuable as we are preparing for the Power of Small Conversations initiative in the fall. Thank you for equipping us so well to lead these conversations. Now, for everyone's information, I just want to tell you that the recording of this evening's presentation will be available shortly. Please share it with your family and friends. Also, if you're interested in our past events, such as digital anti-Semitism, they are available for viewing on our NCJWC website. We thank you all for being part of this insightful presentation. Good evening and good night.
Thank you so much.